So good morning again. So yesterday, after I completed putting this message together, Becky said to me, "So, is it going to be a good talk tomorrow?" And she asks me that all the time, and usually I tell her no. But I said to her yesterday, I said, and we talked about it again this morning, I said, there's really one problem with the message that I'm going to give tomorrow. And she said, what? I said, it's really hard to do. I said, I know what I'm going to be talking about. I find it so hard to do. So I just wanted to mention it. I'm going to mention it a couple of times because I know what I'm going to speak about. If you can do it, it's really wonderful. But I know how difficult it is to go through life doing what I'm going to suggest. And I got the idea for doing this. We were laughing as Becky and I had lunch with a friend yesterday, and this is like the second or third title that I've gotten from this friend. Every time we have lunch with her or dinner, she gives me ideas for talks. And I told her when we used to be in Seal Beach and I was assistant minister at a church, I had to come up with my talks a month in advance because they put it in the bulletin. And I hated doing it because a month later, I had no idea why I picked that talk title and had no idea what I was going to talk about, but I had to do it because my boss said, this is what we do. And she could never come up with talk titles either, but Becky could. And so she would come to me and she'd go, call up Becky, I need some talk titles. And I'd call up Becky and I'd say, Margie needs talk titles. And she'd say, okay, call me back in 10 minutes. And 10 minutes later, she'd have a dozen titles. We didn't know what the hell they meant, but we had talk titles to put in the bulletin, And so we kind of nicknamed her. We gave her the nickname of the title maven, because anytime we needed a title, we'd call her. And I told her yesterday, now Angie has that title, because every time I talk to Angie, I come up with a title. And this one, the idea, Blessings in Disguise, the way I got it, Angie and I are Facebook friends, and she had this on Facebook, and I asked her if she knew the person that wrote it, and she said no, but it's a guy named Steve Maraboli, and this quote comes from him, and he said, as I look back on my life, I realize that every time I thought I was being rejected from something good, I was actually being redirected to something better. Every time he thought he was rejected from something good, he was moving towards something that was better. And as soon as I read that, I said to Becky, that's a talk title. And what it is, sometimes I get how difficult it is and what a challenge it is to find hidden blessings in something that's going on in our life when we particularly perceive it as being a problem or being a hurdle that we need to jump through or some kind of obstacle that's getting in the way of something that we really want to experience. And the truth is that all of those issues, all of those hurdles, all of those problems, all of those obstacles don't have to be the reality of our life. What if we thought about them, and this is the part I know that's really hard, what if we thought about them as actually being gifts from life that are going to help us move into the higher potential of who we really are? And it's so easy to talk about. And when you're going through it, it's so easy to say, oh, life just gave me another gift. Ernest Holmes wrote that when we choose our thoughts, we change our life. Yes. And that's the basic of all new thought philosophy. And he also taught that when we use the universal laws, when we learn how to use them and realize that the kingdom of God is right within us, yes, we can begin to see any circumstance as either, it's our choice. We can see it either as something that we're going to grow through, or we can see it as something that we're going to get stuck in. And if we get stuck in it, we're going to repeat over and over and over again what we absolutely don't want, and that's fear. That's fear. And so, situations can appear to be negative, And we're the ones that label them, because any situation is really neutral. We put the labels on them, and we do it by our past experience, by conditioning, by our own perceptions, and we decide whether they're positive or negative. And we get to decide, I know I've said this a lot in the last few weeks, that, Einstein said the biggest question the most important question we can ever ask ourselves is the universe a friendly place or not? And we get to decide that for ourselves. And so our beliefs, the beliefs that we have can lead us to believing either good things, or they can push us to believe that we're stuck in a prison. And the truth is, we create the prison that we're stuck in, except we don't see it. We don't get to see it, and when we do, we realize we've got the key to unlock that prison door. And when we learn to go through these challenges in a more mindful way, we can see every situation that we're in as a blessing. And we can be grateful for them. And in my notes in big things I wrote, really difficult for the second time. And I just wanted a couple of things that Ernest Holmes said. He said, nothing is real unless we make it real. Nothing is real unless we make it like that. So if we're going through a really difficult situation, we're the ones that get to decide that. And he also said that the attitude we should carry through in life should be one of a blessing rather than cursing life. And I just wanted to read a quote of his. He said, "Learn to see God in all manifestation, in all people, and through all events." He said, "The ordinary person sees only a lump of matter. Not so with the awakened soul. He sees in all things the divine mind at work, molding out into expression what it feels like to be of life, of color, of form, and of beauty." And so we get to make that choice. And let me just give you a couple of examples that I read about this week. I read about a fellow named James Costello, who was one of the victims of the bombing in Boston at the marathon. He was one of the people that was gravely wounded. And he said that it was the worst moment of his life. And you don't need to have much of an imagination to see why that would be. Somebody gravely injured there would say that it was the worst moment of his life. And then in the next sentence, he said, "But I wouldn't change anything about it, because on the next level, it was the best thing that ever happened to me." And the reason he said that is he met the love of his life because of that, because he had to go to a rehab hospital, and guess who his nurse was? And so he wouldn't change. It didn't say what his accident was, but well, I guess it wasn't an accident, but most of the people that were in rehab had lost limbs, so that's probably what it could be. And the point of the article, one of the points was that we can be way too quick to judge an experience, and that sometimes the best comes from the worst. And another example that I read, and this would particularly maybe hit home to some of the people in the Thursday book group. The person writing this article said that something happened to him last year that he really, really had to dig deep to come through, because his sister died. His sister was Debbie Ford, who wrote the book, Why Good People Do Bad Things, that we're doing on Thursdays. And he said he wasn't sure, I guess they were really close, and he said when she died, he wasn't sure if he could ever find joy again in his life. And then he remembered that she created a work that she called the shadow process, which helped people find gold in their own darkness, is how he put it. And he used her process to help himself recover and get back to being able to love life again. And he ended the article with a couple of questions. And the two questions were, where have you found gold in a bad situation? Where have you found gold in a bad situation? And the other one was, how has a negative experience helped you discover a part of you that you now wouldn't give up? Let me read that again. How has a negative experience helped you discover a part of you that you now wouldn't give up? When I read that second question, I probably have talked about this before, but I do a lot of reading, maybe like pieces of 40 books on Friday, and then I take notes, and on Saturday I put it all together in the morning. When I read that yesterday morning, when I reread it, I literally dropped my pencil, and I had this aha moment that Becky was in another room. I ran in and I said, oh my God, what I just realized preparing this message. And I'll tell you what it was, and this is not an exaggeration. I realized that everything that's good in my life now, everything that I value in my life now, came from a moment that was the single worst moment in my life, and that I was positive I was totally broken and could never recover from. I was absolutely sure that nothing could ever be worse, and I didn't know how I would ever get back. And it's too long to go into all of it, but I'll just tell you what a piece of it was. My ex-wife and I were separated, and I had the kids in the house and was supporting her living someplace else. And I asked her to come back one weekend when I was, when I needed to go on a business trip, and she did, and it really worked. So I asked her to do it again another weekend, and when I came back the second time, when I was gone, she had backed up a truck to the house, taken all of the furniture, and kidnapped the kids. So I came home to a 3.5 or 2.5 page letter informing me that, you know, she was gone, the furniture was gone, which I really didn't care so much about, but my 3 kids were gone too. And that, for me, was the worst moment, if you could imagine what that feels like, to think, oh my God, I might never see my kid again.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm not allowed to make fun of her when she does this, because she
No.
thinks she'd kill me.
Okay, you know what, we're gonna use.
Okay, we're gonna use that? All right. So, that was, for me, the worst moment in my life. And what I realized yesterday, when I read that question, was everything that's ever happened to me that's good happened to me because of that moment, because it pushed me to do things that I never thought I would be able to do. Huh? No, it's actually, it's at, which one is on?
Napoleon.
Okay, so what it pushed me to do was it pushed me to when I went to an attorney to file for divorce, and he said to me, nope. He said, I won't do it. You'll have to get another attorney. And when I asked him why, he said, because you're just really a mess, and you need to. No, he did, and he said you need to go do some work on yourself, and after you do 3 months work on yourself, come back. And so he actually literally sent me to somebody to do some counseling, and so that horrible moment in my life led me to go to counseling, which led me to do something that I had wanted to do forever, which was move to California. I was living in Maine at the time. So the counseling helped get me to move to California. Moving to California, I met Becky. Meeting Becky, we decided to try the Science of Mind Church in Huntington Beach, which led to everything else. So all of it led from that one horrible moment when I came in, and I thought, how will I ever get past this moment? And the other thing, Becky and I talk about this every once in a while, I called up my best friend who was also going through a divorce, And, misery likes company. And he came over, and I walked him through the house and showed him, everything gone, and I let him read the letter. And he walked over to me, and he put his arms around me, and he hugged me. And then he separated us, and he looked in my eyes, and he said, "Don't worry, we'll get through this. Not you'll, we'll get through this." And that turned that worst moment, and everything I have now happened because of that. And I saw a saying that in preparing this that I want to share with you, and I thought, boy, this is worth the price of the talk. And it's kind of an offset of something probably some of you have heard, but I've never quite heard it put this way. And somebody said when she was growing up, her mom always used to tell her, if you don't close the wrong doors, the right ones won't open. If you don't close the wrong doors, the right ones won't open. So I saw an article in Huffington Post this week by somebody named Matthew Trinetti, and the title was 10 Reasons to Love the Obstacles of Your Life. And I'm not going to do 10, but I'll do a few of them. And one of them, he said, obstacles show us who we really are. They show us who we are. He said, it's like what lurks inside you when you get cut open. It's like he said, it's like you're doing surgery and you get cut open, and whatever is there, whatever you see, whether you like it or you don't like it, he said it's there, and you can begin to deal with it. And what we find is so often we find we're so much stronger than we thought we ever could be, that we're way more powerful beings than we give ourselves credit for. And a second one he said was obstacles help us focus on what's important. What do we really want to put our energy on? And I know I read this a couple of years ago, but I love this. And it's a letter that an 18-year-old girl sent her parents during the first year of being away at college, doing her freshman year. And she's been gone about 12 weeks, and this is the letter she sends back to her parents. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry I haven't written lately, but all my things were destroyed in the dorm fire. My eyes are almost completely healed now, and the doctor assures me there'll be no permanent damage from the smoke. While the dorm is being rebuilt, I moved in with my boyfriend. I think you met Roy when you were here for Parents Weekend. I know how much you've always wanted grandchildren, so you'll be happy to know I'm expecting a baby at the end of next summer. And then it goes on. Please excuse this exercise in English composition. There was no dorm fire. My eyes aren't damaged. I'm not living with my boyfriend, and I'm not pregnant. However, I did receive a D in English and an F in French, and I wanted to be sure you got this information in the proper perspective. So, that's what he means when he says, what do you want to put your energy on? Probably they didn't care that she got a D or an F after realizing she's not pregnant and her eyes are okay. The third thing he talked about is it helps us to find meaning. Obstacles help us to find meaning in our life. We can find purpose in what hurts. Sometimes when something hurts, you can, how many times have we read about people that have found meaning in their life when they had a serious illness, or we get to tell our story the way we want it to be, and what we tell about it, we choose. So we can choose to be filled with growth on it, or we could choose not to be. And the fourth thing he talked about, he said obstacles give us an opportunity to change our life for the better. And he said, what happened? Did somebody dump you? Did you lose your job? Did you see a good friend die? And he said, those are events that can help you reassess how you're living your life and what you want your life to be, and to make changes. Joan Borisenko, who's a psychologist and a teacher at Harvard and a spiritual writer, said, that life's ordeals, they can either move us towards transformation, or they can move us away from transformation, and there are opportunities to find new strengths. And she said, just if you want an example, take a look at some of the literature that gets written by people in prison. And it really brought back a memory to me. One of the women that I graduated the School of Ministry with called me up one day, and she said, you'll never believe who just joined my church. And I said, who? Somebody famous? And she said, yeah. And I said, who? And she said, Eldridge Cleaver. Remember Eldridge Cleaver? Mm-hmm. Soul on Ice, Black Panthers, killer? He, I don't know if he was a killer, but he joined her church and became a religious science person. And I got to have lunch with him one day, and he was a totally changed person from that prison experience. And you couldn't meet a more loving, wonderful guy. And, you know, if you had read about what he was like before, he wasn't such a loving, wonderful guy in those days. But, you know, he was a pretty bitter person. But it totally, the obstacle of prison totally changed his outlook on life. So Eric Butterworth says that what we need to do is to become intrapreneurs. Intrapreneurs. Not entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs. He said we need to take charge of our own life. And he said, he makes a really great point. He said, you know, we can't always control what happens to us. He said, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control what happens within you. Yes. You can control your reaction, you can control your moods, you can control your expectations. And he said that all of that security comes from within. And it's our business, the business of an intrapreneur is to recognize that spirit is always flowing within us. And we get the choice. And Barbara DeAngelis, in one of her books, talks about going out one day to buy a new car. And listen to how your perspective changes. So she goes out to buy a new car, and the salesman just makes one mistake after another. First, he couldn't find the keys to the car she wanted to drive. Then when he found the keys, you know, even with the key, if you've ever gone out, they have a code they have to hit. Well, he forgot the code. So he had to go back and get the code. And now she's doing this before work. And he finally gets the keys, he gets the code, and they go for a test drive, and the car runs out of gas. And she's furious. And it's before, she didn't say this, but it's before cell phones, so he couldn't just go, hello. He had to go somewhere, find a store with a phone, and make a call. And she said when he came back, this was in LA, and it was a really hot day in LA, she said his face was beet red and sweat's pouring down, and her first thought was, oh my God, he's going to have a stroke now. And she felt, she felt bad that she was not nice to him, so she apologized. She said, I'm sorry. She wanted to try to make a connection while they were waiting for somebody to come with a can of gas. And he said to her, you don't have to apologize. It's not you, it's me. Today's a really bad day. Right before you walked in, I got a phone call. My mother was having exploratory surgery today, and the cancer is spread, and it's going to be fatal, the cancer. And when I get home from work today, when I get off work today, I have to be the one to tell her, and I don't know if I can do that. Well, that certainly changed Barbara's entire perspective about it. She said what it did for me was I moved out of judgment and into feeling. Yes. And the entire experience changed for both of them. So Wayne Dyer, in one of his books, has a chapter, Grief as a Blessing. And he begins the chapter with a quote from Rumi. And here's the quote. I saw grief drinking a cup of sorrow and called out, it tastes sweet, does it not? You caught me, grief answered, and you've ruined my business. How can I sell sorrow when you know it's a blessing? And the point that Dyer makes is, he says, the falls of our life, when we fall down, the falls of our life can help us move to a higher consciousness, that we can learn something from grief. And he's not just talking about somebody dying, but we can let it, we get the choice again to let it pull us down, or to recognize, and again, I know how hard this is, to recognize that there's a blessing in it, and we can regain our footing and soar above it. And so I just wanted to close with another story about seeing things in a different perspective, how it could be helpful. And so I read a story about a fellow whose wife died from cancer, and it was a long, really drawn out procedure, and it was really tough on him, and he had a young son. And after going through this process, a few years after that, he meets somebody else, and he falls in love, and they get engaged, and she gets breast cancer, and she won't tell him because she didn't want him to have to go through that experience again. So she breaks off with him without telling him why, refuses to speak to him, take any of his phone calls, and she just leaves. And he goes nuts because he doesn't understand. And finally, he shows up at her door one day, and she lets him in, and she tells him the truth. She tells him the story. And he looks at her and he said, "Cancer? That's all?" He said, "Only cancer?" He said, speaking about him and his son, he said, "We know how to deal with cancer. We can handle that. I thought you didn't love me." How much a situation in our life can change when we let go of the judgment and try to see it in a different way. So I want to close with something from Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, "Life is filled with many wonders, like the blue sky, the sunshine, the eyes of a baby. Our breathing, for example, can be very enjoyable. I enjoy breathing every day." And then he goes on, he said, "But many people appreciate the joy of breathing only when they have asthma or a stuffed up nose. We don't need to wait until we have asthma to enjoy our breathing. Awareness of the precious element of happiness is itself the practice of right mindfulness. Elements like these are within us and all around us. In each second of our lives, we can enjoy them. If we do so, the seeds of peace, joy, and happiness will be planted in us, and they will become strong. The secret to happiness is happiness itself. Wherever we are, anytime, we have the capacity to enjoy the sunshine, the presence of each other, the wonder of our breathing. We don't have to travel anywhere else to do so. We can be in touch with all these things